I'm very pleased to introduce Jade Ballek today, our final speaker. Jade has worked with curriculum assessment, instruction, and technology infusion for over 20 years, having been a classroom teacher, technology teacher, learning coach, and most recently a learning consultant with a school division in our province. She supports the development of online learning at the Distance Learning Center, as well as overseeing various technology infusion initiatives through her division. Jade received her master's in education, educational technology and design from the U of S, and speaks on a variety of topics related to education. She has kids that have gone through the system and are in the university down east, and she's been a recent university student herself, so she comes well equipped. So please welcome with me Jade Ballek for the topic, Next Generation of Learners, What to Expect.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, I have to move to the side because when I got here, I realized that I would not be able to see any of you, so we're going to try this. It happens to me everywhere I go, which is why I married a guy who was 6'2". So thank you very much for that nice welcome, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your conference today and your education day. I'm really quite excited to have a chance to talk about the K-12 lens with people who are also passionate about teaching and learning. I'm going to try not to hop around. When I start sharing stories, I do get really excited because there's a lot of great things going on in K-12 education, not just in Saskatchewan, but I'm going to be talking through my lens from Saskatchewan, but of course across the entire country. But I do have a confession to make. I don't really know a whole lot about pharmacy. So I was a little bit worried about coming here. So I'm going to tell you what I know, and I'm going to try to wrap it up in about 2 minutes because that's all I got. I have a fantastic pharmacist in my home community of Outlook. His name is Matt. He is fantastic. I'm going to tell you that he is kind of the perfect blend between what I think is the science of understanding all those multisyllabic words that he has on that paper in front of me, and the human relations of making sense of that for me. And Matt is so awesome, in fact, that when he came to our community, we signed him up to be on our curling team, even though he doesn't curl. But we still love him. He actually kind of sucks at curling, but we're going to work on that. So I know that. I have a great pharmacist, and when you have a great pharmacist, you don't ever want to give them up. I know that. I also know where I am from, in rural Saskatchewan, we don't have a lot of kids going into pharmacy. So I'm not really sure why. I know that you have very high entrance requirements, which makes sense. I know that you're probably looking for people that have a good, strong background in science and math, and you want kids with a good work ethic. We have a lot of those in rural Saskatchewan, but they don't seem to be going into pharmacy. So it was really ironic, actually, when Jeff contacted me about coming and talking to you, because 2 out of my 3 children, I think, would make great pharmacists. And in fact, I was trying to convince them when they were young. So it's kind of weird that I'm here talking to you and then telling them, by the way, I'm talking to some people in the pharmacy, and I got to tell them that you're not going in. So they were kind of mad, and they said, don't bring that up, but I did. So my youngest son, Mason, who is graduating actually in a couple of weeks, up until grade 10, was really thinking about being a pharmacist until he went to the career fair in Rosetown. And there were so many other options, and other options that were appealing to him in different ways. So his world was really opened up. Now, we were talking earlier about the pull of the trades. And Mason he knew he wasn't going into the trades, but he decided to go into business instead. One of the reasons he chose to go into business, which happened his decision around that was over the last 2 years, was because of a dual credit partnership that we have with the university in SunWest. Right now, he's taking his business admin course. He's getting a high school credit for it, and he's getting Com 101. That was very appealing to him as a student. It was certainly appealing to me as a mother, because that's about $850 worth of tuition that I'm not paying, plus that lovely $200 textbook. And the Edwards School of Business also put $10,000 worth of scholarships into that program to entice students to take that. So there's a very good opportunity for him to not only have this, he has this course paid. If he gets 60% or more on it, he's going to get his COM, and he's probably going to get a scholarship. That did help him make a decision to move away from pharmacy and into commerce. The other thing was, I think there's a misconception about what pharmacists do when you're in grade 10, because his conversation with me was, I don't think I just want to hand out pills all day. And I said, I think there's way more to pharmacy than that. Would you like to meet Matt? Would you like to get involved? Would you like to do some job shadowing? How do you want to learn about this? And because there wasn't that infrastructure built in rural Saskatchewan for him to do that, he sort of went to something else. So I wanted to start with that story because I'm going to keep coming back to my mother lens, which is probably as important as the other ways I look at this topic. So I don't know about pharmacy. I do know about teaching and learning in the K-12 environment. So my job here today isn't to tell you, you need to do this, you should do this. What I want to do is share some of those stories and give you an idea to think about, or give you a moment to think about how might that impact what you're doing in post-secondary colleges. So let's start then by even just defining this next generation. So this comes from the US Census Bureau 2013, where they've looked at the generations and kind of put together some characteristics. So you know the matures. You're dealing with them in healthcare, you're dealing with them in pharmacy, those that were born before 1944. Then we move into the baby boomers, and you're really getting to know the baby boomers as well. My own parents are baby boomers. And I think about their changing needs in terms of their healthcare and how many more medications they are on in the last 10 years. So you're really getting to know them as well. Then we look at the Gen Xers. I'm a Gen Xer. According to the US Census Bureau here, I'm disillusioned and skeptical, which sometimes it might be, but I'm also a farmer, so that might be part of it. But I think what's really interesting for me is that word information. I was in grade 8 when I got my first home computer. It was a Commodore VIC-20, and I used to spend, I know, this is a bad story. My kids say, don't say this with your outside voice, Mom, but I used to spend lots of time coding computer games in my basement reading my computer magazines. So why I share that, all right, there's someone else back there. And why I share that story with you is just to tell you that as a Gen Xer, I was the first generation where home computers were affordable for the first time. Not only were they in our homes, but they were in our schools. And in grade 10, 11, and 12, in my rural Saskatchewan school, which is really small, 350 students at present, I was learning computer programming. Kind of interesting that I was still learning to do keyboarding on a typewriter, not a word processor, but I learned how to code if-then. So that's the Gen X. So for the first time, home computers. Fast forward to my own children, who are the millennials, and they've never grown up in a home without a home computer. Educational games, they learned how to make PowerPoints in school. We had computer labs, we still have computer labs. That started coming into schools more prevalently with the millennials, and how we used those computers to teach and enhance learning was very different than what we're going to be seeing now. With those millennials, though, what's really interesting for me is this next generation, according to this, starts in 1996. My youngest son was born in 1996. It was the same year that we got dial-up internet at my farm in the middle of nowhere. I was also at home with 3 little kids, 3 little boys, and I was going crazy. And so I got onto social chatting in 1996. I was in a chat group. Way back then, it was slow, it was painful, but it was what I needed to chat with people, other parents across North America because of our time zones. So by the time my own children were growing up, and especially with Mason, he's never grown up in a time in a house that didn't have internet in our house in a single computer. Same with the school system. So I remember when I first started teaching with the internet and Google and YouTube, and that completely changed the way I taught. Because before, I was really good at role modeling the glacier, the advancing and retreating and stationary glacier, and then I put up an animation or simulation on the smartboard, and the kids were like, wow, we get it finally. So, a little disappointing. So that's that new millennium, or pardon me, that's that new generation. And so my son, who's graduating this year, is kind of just on the cusp there. So who's next? What's next? Well, we don't have a name for them. There's lots of names being thrown around. But what we do know is this. This is everywhere. Technology is in the palm of their hands. 8 years ago, I got my first phone call from a parent who said, my daughter's being bullied through texting. We didn't call it cyberbullying at the time. And in fact, that was a grade 7 student. I didn't even have a whole lot of students 8 years ago who even had phones in grade 7. Fast forward to today. This is my niece, Olivia. Olivia's from Calgary, and she was out 2 weeks ago with my brother sitting in the back of the truck, the back of the tractor, and they're coming out to help out with seeding. She's 3.5, and she has her own iPod. She takes photos. She said to me, Auntie Jade, can we take a selfie? Because she has older sisters. You betcha. We took tons of selfies and goofy faces. She's not connecting to the internet, but this is the world in which she now lives. So even the difference between my own son, who didn't get his own smartphone until he was 15, to Olivia and this next generation, we're seeing more and more technology in the palm of their hand at a younger and younger age. So that is big for us in K-12 education. So Mary Meehan from the Forbes magazine had a great article about the next generation, and she wants to call them the we generation. They're constantly connected. They're tweeting, they're Facebooking, they're Instagramming. In fact, they're moving away from Facebook now. They're Snapchatting. My middle son is at a wedding, and I said, oh my gosh, Snapchat me some pictures of you and your girlfriend. You know, that's how we communicate. That's the we generation. They're constantly in touch. Now, I try to live in that space because my kids are there and because the kids I work with are there. So right now, I'm just itching to take a photo of all of you and tweet. But I know we don't have enough time, and I got a lot of things, so I won't. But every moment for them is a we moment. And I see that everywhere, from my youngest son, who is 17, all the way down. They are sharing. So there's a debate. Is that good? Is it bad? There's an interesting video on YouTube called Look Up that a fellow from the UK produced about all the reasons to put this down and view this world. Interestingly, there was a lot of parodies and rebuttals, and another video from a fellow from the UK who said, look down, and all of the reasons this is great. So I've linked those at the end of my presentation. I also did tweet out a link to my presentation. I've uploaded it to SlideShare, so for those of you that want to access this later online, it's there for you, and you can watch the videos. We just don't have enough time. But it's really interesting conversation. For me, though, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, if it's good or bad. It is what it is, and we've got to now take that in the K-12 environment and deal with it. So there are lots of implications for teaching and learning, because if we want to engage our learners, we need to get into those online spaces where they live. We need to know their world, and that's a lot of what I do, is getting into those spaces. I get into them as a parent because I think it's important to know what my kids are doing. I think it's important to model it. And I've had those, what was that tweet about? Conversations with my own kids and with kids that I know in schools. So it has greatly impacted what we're doing in K-12. So as Jeff mentioned, I have a lot of lenses at which I come at and look at this particular topic. And that online master's student piece, I just want to talk to you a little bit about. I was a master's student with U of S, Educational Technology and Design. I could have taken my entire program online. I chose to take some of it face-to-face. I'm only an hour out of Saskatoon, and I really wanted to compare what my online learning experience was going to be like at a master's program with face-to-face, and just look at the ways in which I was being engaged as a learner, as an online learner, compared to face-to-face. And here's what I found to be true for me, and I'm not going to say it's for everybody, but I knew those people online much better than I ever got to know anybody in my face-to-face class. And so when I go and present, often someone will come up and say, Jade, and I'll be like, I don't know this person, and then they'll show me their name tag, and I'm like, oh, Michelle, oh, Candace, because we were online learners together. I was an online learner with Ola from Egypt during the Egyptian Revolution. How exciting was that? I was an online learner and actually did a project together with a fellow that is teaching at Columbia. So because of my online opportunities, I've met people from all over the globe. And more importantly, I actually got to do a master's degree. Because as a mom, a farm wife, living in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan, with 3 really busy boys, I would have never taken time off to be a master's student, ever. And in our school division, that's exploding right now. There are lots of people signing up to be taking their masters in education because of the flexibility. It's hard, it's dedication, but it's the same things that we're now seeing in our K-12 environment. We're asking students to get into that online environment to open up the possibilities for them. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So again, there's lots of changes at the K-12 level, and I'm going to highlight a few of them. I know I don't have time for probably all of them, but I thought I'd throw them out here just in case. And you can always look at the slideshow later. And I would like to just invite you to think about what impact this is going to have on your lens, where you're going to be maybe seeing the changes if you're not already seeing them. So we're going to look at these areas. And again, I'm probably not going to get to all of them. But these are the things that are changing. And those are my main speaking points then. So let's talk about research-based learning. For the first time, I'm really seeing classroom teachers excited to know about brain-based research and what it means for teaching and learning. This infographic comes out of EdTech for Teachers, a blog, and you'll see this everywhere in educational K-12 literature right now. The source is Columbia University, and they're putting together some information that tells us what we need to know about engaging our learners. So this is engaging the active learner, which says an instructor generally says 100 to 200 words a minute. I know I'm going faster, and a student only hears 50 to 100 words half. So you've only caught half of what I've said, which is disappointing, because I had a lot of good things to say. Worse yet, in a typical lecture class, students are attentive only 40% of the time. I'm not a math person, but I think that's bad news as well. And then students retain about 70% of what they hear in the first 10 minutes of class and 20% during the last 10 minutes. What does that tell me? That tells me that I can't stand up and talk to a class of kids. They have to be actively engaged. So that's the kind of conversations we're having at the K-12 level. How do we activate their brains so that they can take this content that they're learning and hook it and bring it in and make it part of their learning experience, and not like I used to say to my grade 7s, is it just going in one ear and dribbling out the other? So actually learning and not being a content dump. So I just wanted to share this. This was tweeted out by one of my grade 4 teachers in SunWest. She's not alone, but she's starting to really do this exploration about what it means to bring in physical activity in the classroom. And we see more and more classrooms doing body breaks. Brain gym is really popular with our elementary school because there's lots of hydration as part of that learning piece as well. Our director, Dr. Guy Tétrault, said this a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't quote him exactly, but he really believes that if classrooms look the same way they did today as they did in the past, we're doing something wrong. And because of that, SunWest is, I would say, maybe I'm biased, but I think we're moving forward leaps and bounds to really address some of these learners' needs. And the one way that we're doing that in our little rural school division is to really harness the power of that digital technology. So again, if we believe that our kids are in these spaces, which they are, and I just actually got a message from one of them, they are, even though they know I'm here, which is bad. But if they are in these spaces, we need to be in there too. And we need to figure out how to get in here to make it engaging and how to find out how to make learning real to them rather than having them passively sit in our classes being disengaged. So there's a lot of things going on, not only in Saskatchewan, but across Canada and across North America. When you start reading about one-to-one pilot projects that we're doing in SunWest, but one-to-one projects, we're definitely encouraging students more and more to bring their own device and learn how to use this as a tool for learning, not just communicating in a Snapchat environment, but actually teaching the digital citizenship pieces that go with that. When I mentioned 8 years ago that first conversation happened with a parent and I around text bullying, really we haven't done a very good job of getting into those spaces to teach the kids anything. And somebody's called the World Wide Web the Wild Wild West, where there's been no rules. And now we're just starting in Saskatchewan anyways to address that and say, how do we teach those rules? How do we get into that space and teach them how to use this appropriately? Well, what we're doing is modeling it for teaching and learning. And that's why kids are actually moving away from Facebook, because we are getting into Facebook. It's no longer exciting to them because grandma's posting pictures and grandma's commenting on things, and people are moving out of that because we're showing them how to use it appropriately. We're using learning management systems and course management systems. So we use Moodle, and that's where we host our online courses. I know when I was a U of S learner, it was Blackboard. Alberta's gone with Desire to Learn. There's a number of them out there. And we're moving some of that learning into those online spaces. And in fact, next year I will be doing a blended learning research project in partnership with the University of Saskatchewan to try to figure out how to get the perfect blend, I guess, of face-to-face and online just in a regular high school classroom. So not one where it's necessarily distance, but both. So they can maybe get some of their content, some of their instructional videos, maybe start engaging in some discussion forums and conversations online. So that's the kind of research that we're going to be doing in SunWest and what we're exploring certainly across Canada. Skype has become really big, so we're starting to bring in other classrooms into our schools. We're connecting classrooms. I'll show you an example later. But guest speakers are coming in from all over the world, really. I tweeted out yesterday or maybe this morning a classroom that was Skyping with people that were in the Bahamas actually researching sharks for part of their unit. So we're connecting classrooms. There's something called Mystery Skype. It's kind of like 20 questions. You'll Skype with the classroom and they have to ask questions and they have to try to identify where you're from. You're seeing a lot more of that happening, where we're bringing the world into our classrooms in a way that has never been done before. 3D printers, ooh, so exciting, all the things that we can do with those. And I don't know how to run any of that technology, but the kids sure do. So what does that mean for us? And what I think is going to mean for you is you're going to see kids that are used to a very different learning environment that they've had in the past. So this is an elementary classroom, and typically we would see more pods and groupings in an elementary classroom. You might not have seen everybody having their own device and access to the internet all the time. You're going to see more and more of that. 2 of our schools next year are going completely one-to-one, Elrose and Kenaston, where every student is going to have their own device. That's not just happening in SunWest. It's really happening across Canada. And that kind of learning environment where students have the flexibility to learn where they need to learn, what makes sense for them, is also filtering into middle level and certainly into high school as well. So it's not just being limited to an elementary setting. This group work and collaboration and all of those sorts of skills are being actually enhanced, I guess, through these pods at every level, and they're being encouraged as well. So in order to move us forward, we're doing a lot of work with PD. And SunWest this year, for example, offered every one of their teachers 4 half-days of in-school PD to form collegial pods here. This is an example of one being led by a learning coach. And they were focusing on 2 of the skills. So not even talking content yet. We're just talking about the skills of learning. And we were focusing on critical thinking and collaboration. And one of the important parts of critical thinking is learning to ask good questions. Because what we find is they don't know how to ask good questions. They don't even want to ask questions. They just want to sit and passively receive the information because it's a little harder. It's a little more work. So we're shifting away from that passive reception of information to really that active engagement, getting kids to learn to ask questions. It's a slow process, but it's an exciting one. We're also using webinars. So up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see that I was presenting to a group. In some cases, those groups are entire staffs. So I sit in Outlook Saskatchewan with my headphones on, turn my webcam on for a bit, and I present. Now, if that sounds like an information dump, it potentially could be. But again, even in our PD, we're designing it so that there's a chance for interactivity. So we have microphones on the other end. We have chat bars or chat features. So we'll stop and get everybody to participate, even though it's being done remotely. So we've been doing that for a couple of years now. And the teachers are really excited about not having to leave their home in order to go get that PD. But it's not, again, that information dump because they're really interacting with what we're talking about in the webinars. Curriculum is also changing. And so the ministry 6 years ago started completely changing all of the curriculum. They started with 6 to 9, moved down to 1 to 5, and now they're up in the 10 to 12. Everything was changed very rapidly, very short period of time, lots of pushback. But it's going more of a national focus is to focus on outcomes rather than objectives. And what's really changing for curriculum is that we're not going really wide. We're narrowing what's essential and going deeper. So there was a lot of pushback. But what was really exciting for me was that at the center there of what our goals in education at K-12 are still the same. We want Saskatchewan students to leave our schools with a sense of self and community. We want them to be engaged citizens, and we want them to be lifelong learners. So the foundational piece of education did not change. What changed was how we were going to go about getting to that content. So we were really being encouraged to let them explore, to have authentic learning experiences, to ask good questions. That, of course, takes more time, so you can't teach this much stuff when you've only got 100 instructional hours per course. So the curriculum tightened, and it went deeper. So I did a little bit of searching and found out we have a lot of the same mandates. You have the same mission about lifelong learners. You're looking for people that are contributing to society and obviously are responsible for patient care. So that was exciting for me to know that there's a continuation, that we are maybe narrowing that gap. And so we have the same foundational goals. It's how do we get there that's really so challenging. So how do you determine what's essential? How do you take what was being taught before and bring it down? For K-12, for example, when I taught grade 7, quite a few years ago, I would start my day off, or my opening spiel off, as I called it, on the opening day, and I'd just stack up my curriculum documents. And they were about 2 feet tall in my binders. And my opening day was kind of like, all right, grade 7, we got a lot of stuff to go through this year, because I taught homeroom, so ELA, math, science, social, computers, health. So now it's been tightened. It's not really that impressive anymore to do it, so I don't do it anymore. But what they did was narrow it down to focus on what do we really want students to understand, know, understand, and do. And I can't even imagine the process, but I know that they did have focus groups coming and working at the ministry. So I want to give you just an example from the Science 20 renewal. Dean Elliott is the the curriculum writer for the ministry, and he was talking a little bit about this process to us. So in Saskatchewan 20-level science, it has been biology, chemistry, and physics. That's changed. So how do you get the people together with the passion about biology, chemistry, and physics, and people like you that say our kids need to know this stuff, and change it? But they did change it, and we're piloting right now 3 new science courses at the 20 level. The old ones are gone. We have Health Sciences 20, where you're going to see your bio component. We have Environmental Science 20, where you'll also see your bio component. And we have Physical Science, which is a combination of physics and chemistry. So again, everybody used to be out here with the amount of stuff that they were expecting students to know. So how do you determine what's essential and bring it down so that students have the time to go deeper? That's what they've done. It was a very, very long process. And like I say, we're just piloting it right now to make sure that we're still meeting your needs at a post-secondary level, but also meeting the needs of new jobs and new interests. Students needed some more information about healthcare. So they developed this Health Sciences, which is a really, really exciting course. So when kids maybe have an interest, like my son Mason, in grade 10, I can say to him, I could have said to him, take Health Sciences 20 and have a look. So those sorts of things are happening at K-12. So we look at it as the 40-40-40 rule when we then take those curriculum and decide how to teach that in the 100 instructional hours. And what we do focus on, and one of my jobs as a learning coach in the past was to help teachers with identifying this. What are the big ideas? What are the most important things that after 40 years you really need this student to know about this topic? What would be important for them to know after 40 months? And what is that kind of, oh, it's nice to know, but I can probably find that information online, and if I could Google it, or if I can go into some kind of a reference, so I can go locate it. I don't need it all the time. So really identifying what is really important in those 100 instructional hours, so that again, it's about good teaching, and I can help the students take that content and make it their own through some really hands-on learning experience. So the question then I would pose to you, what is essential for a pharmacy graduate to know, understand, and do so that patient health isn't at risk? It's probably some of the same questions that you ask yourself when you're looking at curriculum. And then what we've done is really focused on, because we don't determine that. at the school level. The ministry determines that. We now focus on how do we make sure that they've understood it. So inquiry learning has really been at the heart of what we're moving towards, that asking good questions, seeking answers for yourself. We're not the PowerPoint people anymore. Do we have PowerPoint people? For sure we do. But Guy's vision, our director's vision, is to eliminate that within 5 years, that everybody has a chance to really engage in small groups and collaborative groups, collaborating globally and really starting to understand content in a different way through different learning experiences. So again, we focus on not just the stuff that we're teaching and the content, we focus on how we learn it. So the competencies for us are linked to the C21 document, and again, that's on the last slide of this presentation, and it's available online. And this is a national organization that has sort of a framework around the skills that our 21st century learners need to know and what they're asking for. And it's focused around 7 competencies. In SunWest last year, we focused on teaching critical thinking and collaboration. We're going to be doing that again next year, and adding creativity. There's communications in there, character, citizenship, and computer and digital technologies as well. But we didn't want to take it all on at once. So we decided that learning to think critically was the most important skill that we needed to teach our students, so they could ask good questions, so they could go and figure out if information is reliable or not, because we felt that that was a really big gap for us. So as a result of those 4 half days and focusing on these skills, teachers are now, well, they're blogging. This is 2 examples from different blogs. And in the top right-hand corner, one of our middle years teachers in Landis, Saskatchewan said, well, I think it's more important than me reflecting on if I did a good job. I think I need the kids to reflect on, do you think that you're actually a good critical thinker now? So they're putting together a video on, it's a metacognitive piece, on how do you think you did with critical thinking this year. And she's going to be sharing that on Thursday. I'm really excited to see what they've put together. This Module 3 reflection questioning is from an ELA, senior ELA teacher, who really identified in her students that they didn't know how to ask good questions of text. They didn't know, they were just waiting for her to kind of jump in and ask the questions for them. So again, that's shifting for us. And in 5 years, I imagine all of our teachers will be doing these sorts of things. Obviously, there's challenges with any time you're doing project-based work, inquiry work, and because we're just starting on this journey, I'm not going to tell you it's not without its wrinkles, but people are identifying them, and we're coming together very much like you are to identify ways that we might overcome some of those wrinkles on the road. So we're moving away from just the hands-on being so fun in science, which I always could hook the boys because they love my science. I always had food in there for them, and we were always eating in science. But we're moving away from it just being so always in science to hands-on in every single course that we teach. I'm not sure how that's going in math, but that's another topic. So our next generation of learners are being engaged through inquiry, hands-on learning, and are connecting globally. So what are these students going to be asking of you? Are they going to be looking for post-secondary institutions that are allowing them to do these sorts of things in class? Are they going to be, like my son Mason, are the colleges that are appealing to him going to be the ones that promote this sort of connecting and this sort of learning? I don't know, but I suspect it will. I suspect my niece Olivia, in a few years, is going to want this sort of post-secondary experience as well. So I did a little bit of searching and found out that this isn't, it is happening at the university level for sure. There's, question there, professors, do you use social media for one or more of your classes? Please take our survey. So certainly post-secondary is moving into these spaces as well and starting to engage their learners in the same way that we are in K-12. This new study, enabling community of healthcare professionals through social media. So we are moving forward together in some of these areas for sure. One of the big things that you might have heard around K-12 is changing assessment practices, which again, I told Jeff I could be up here probably a day talking about changing assessment practices. What I think is important for you to know is we're really changing how students can show what they know. So what used to be traditionally, hey, write this social studies report, isn't going to be write a social studies report. Because when we connect that back to the social studies outcomes, there's nowhere that says having to write a report is really important. So what we're seeing happening is the social studies teacher and the English teacher working together. And so we're still writing social studies reports, but the mark for the English is going to the English teacher, and the mark for the social is going to the content person, the social studies teacher. So we're changing that. And because not everybody can show what they know through papers, we're also really opening up that with technology and saying, show us what you know using technology. This is just one small example. This is ThingLink. It's students that were learning something in science. They've written little notes on there, there's little dots that you can put on. They can tell you about what they're learning. They can make little videos. We're really encouraging that. This bottom diagram, or this bottom picture, is also showing the differentiated assessment. So the QR codes are showing for different learners, they have different options for assessments as well. So that's really, really changing. So our next generations of learners are being given multiple opportunities to show what they know, including through the use of technology. So when I look at my iPad down here and I think about all of the apps that we're trying out with students, and those one-to-one schools and our pod classrooms that have technology, students are using the technology to show what they know in science and math in ways that we've never done before. They're making math videos, they're blogging, they're making telegrams, and the list goes on. They're green screening. I had them green screening about the Saskatchewan mining industry with grade 4 rocks and minerals. They are excited about their learning because they're excited to use the technology, because this is what they know. So we're getting into those spaces and giving them the opportunity to do that. So given this reality, and this is a reality, the question for you is, are there changes, or what changes might be needed, or maybe more forcefully should be made at the post-secondary level? So I talked a little bit about Mason's opportunity to take that dual credit, which is the next slide, but that personalized learning experience or blended learning experience, our SunWest Distance Learning Center right now has over 100 courses available online to students from grades 1 through 12. So you could be an online learner in grade 1 and take your math or ELA. So my job is to help those teachers design really good online experiences. So this is a Health Science 20 course that was developed by Amy LaFontaine out of Kenniston, and you're going to see that she has a discussion board right under the ethics and immunization section. So she has online learners, and she's having those engaging conversations through a moderated online discussion forum with grade 11 students. This is not unique. This is just an example that sort of fit you as an audience, but this is happening in all of our courses. So when I look at that partnership course that Mason's taking with the University of Saskatchewan, there are 9 modules. They were all developed with different professors. There's online instructional videos. The professors made the assessments, made the answer keys, and this course is facilitated by a teacher. We really don't have much contact with the Edwards School of Business unless there's a question. So it was developed with our teachers. And again, this is the credit course that he's getting his COM 101 and a high school credit as well. It's not our only class. We also have a Learn to Learn Introduction to University Life, which is an elective as well. And we're just constantly having meetings in SunWest with universities and colleges to try to get them involved with online learning at the high school level as well. I've been very involved with power engineering. So we're developing a power engineering course starting with grade 11 students that are starting in the fall. And theoretically, they could have their level 4 power engineering by the time they leave high school. And then they need their hands-on stuff, which in the power engineering industry is called STEAM time. So we're building partnerships with SciAst, SATE, NATE, and industry to get our students into work placements right away. So this is appealing. This is very sexy for kids right now because they're coming to our career fair and they're giving kids an opportunity to do high school credits and university at the same time. Is that going to affect the pharmacy world? I'm not sure, because I think you still have those very specific kids that are, again, science and math background, but our power engineering kids are science and math background too. This is our word that we use, it's a robust course. It's a very robust course. But this is pulling kids in like no other course right now in SunWest. So our next generation of learners are setting their own educational paths. In grade 10, Mason took field crop production instead of keyboarding, because that's all that he could take in Outlook. So instead, because he went through the online course, grade 10, he got a PAA credit where he did 50 hours of agronomy learning online and then another 50 hours in the field. This is happening all across Saskatchewan, and it's definitely on the rise. So what might these learners look for in selecting post-secondary institutions? I think they're going to be looking for colleges that are involved in their high school education. How am I doing for time, Jeff? Because I have a lot more yet, but 5 more minutes. All right. So I'm going to go through my last slides very quickly. We're definitely bringing in those online software opportunities. We were talking earlier about Mathletics. We have Pearson e-textbooks. That's also changing how we get that information to them, so they don't have a textbook instead. They've got a device, and they can access their textbooks online. We also see just a huge growth of different businesses that are connecting to us. For example, Learning Bird is a whole online tutorial system. People in education right now are really excited about K-12 and figuring out how to get into those online spaces, not only to support students, but this one is a tutorial one for parents. So if you don't know how to do math with your grade 7 student, then you can sign up for Learning Bird and learn it with them, and they can help. And that, I'm not working for Learning Bird, but it really looks like a good product. So our next generation of learners is using online software to extend their understanding of curriculum content. We were looking at the Discovery Education content for grade 1, 2, 3, 4 science, which looks fantastic. It's so engaging for learners. It doesn't mean that the teacher will not be involved in the classroom. It changes the nature of teaching. So we've often said we've moved from being the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. And what we're now saying in SunWest is we're not even the guide, we're the activator. We're activating these online spaces, we're activating interests, we're engaging them, and that's our job, is to get them excited about their learning. So by the time they hit grade 10, 11, and 12, they're not wanting to be passive recipients of information and just take it in, write it on the test, regurgitate it, and forget it. We want them to actually be those lifelong learners that your mission statement talks about, and so does ours. So taking learning into their spaces, connecting globally, just some examples. They're putting things up on YouTube. This other little screenshot is a grade 4 classroom that's tweeting with the Saskatchewan Science Centre. They're learning about Saskatchewan habitats, so they ask the Saskatchewan Science Centre questions, and they're having online conversations in class. Let's Talk Science has also been connecting with them. They're really, really interested in that digital world. Here's an example. QR codes, which take students to their websites, over 300 of them, grades 2 to 8. They're creating digital identities. They're online, they're using that, and they're feeling very disconnected in schools because they're not allowed to use these. So again, we've got to get into those online spaces to get them and pull them into our world. There's an example of that first Skype chat with grade friends today. So more and more of that is happening. Students are blogging. I think this is a really fantastic blog. So grade 12 quantitative physics student projects. And below this, I just took a screenshot. There was a whole list of student blogs. They have their own blogs. There's just a screenshot as well of the generator. And what that student's done is walk step by step through their learning. They've had a visual. They've explained what they're learning in their blog. So this teacher is tweeting it out using a hashtag called Comments for Kids and encouraging people to come in and engage in conversations with his students about their learning about quantitative physics. It was fantastic. And that's not unique. You're seeing more and more of that happening where students are sharing their learning in those online spaces. So they're creating digital identities. Are they doing it well? Not yet. Do we hope to help them with that journey? Absolutely. So they are connecting globally. And again, the question is, how might you be able to meet the learners in the spaces where they currently live? Lots more changes to come. Again, I probably could be up here for hours talking about this. I didn't jump. I'm fairly passionate about this because it's exciting. And it's not only exciting for kids, it's exciting for teachers. I have never seen 365 teachers in our school division excited about any division-initiated anything. And I've been doing this for a while. And literally, I get goosebumpy every time I open up an email. When we were just waiting here, I open up an email. Teacher, I think it's Saturday, she's texting me or emailing me a video that she made about her learning journey and about her kids. I get goosebumpy, I get teary because the teachers are excited. And if the teachers are excited, the kids are excited. And if the kids are excited, we've done a good job of creating those lifelong learners. So thank you very much. I do encourage you to connect with me. There is my Twitter handle, email. Again, I tweeted out a link to this presentation if you want to get the links live. I would love to continue this. I know this has been a one-way discussion, so if you'd like to engage in more discussion with me, you definitely do. I agree with you. And so when we were talking about those outcomes, about that foundational knowledge of the stuff, what I call the content, we don't decide in Saskatchewan or in Canada. That's the ministry. So when I mentioned to you about the change from the bio, the physics, and the chemistry, so the ministry pulls in those focus groups to decide, and I'm going to say post-secondary voice would be at that table too, to say what should be those foundational outcomes. What is that foundational knowledge that has to be learned? What's really interesting, though, is trying to determine what that is. So I have a teacher who really thinks that we still need to teach students how to write the 5-paragraph essay, because you need that for life. Do you guys need the 5-paragraph essay in pharmacy for life? For you, though, to get in. Exactly. But now in your jobs, do you guys write a lot? Maybe. You do. Right. So her question was, is it the 5-paragraph essay or is it something different, right? So documenting sources, definitely, and we're saying that that's one of the competencies. But we have to have those conversations. What is important for people to know? And then when you come to what's important for people to know that aren't going post-secondary versus going post-secondary, that opens up another can of worms, for sure. The ministry handles that. They decide in partnership with post-secondary, and then we take that. And it is our mandate to teach every outcome. So when you're saying, you know, what are those foundational pieces, we have to teach them by law. When I was telling you about my stack of curriculum documents, I didn't have to teach that by law. There was a guide. People have to teach the current curriculum, and they have to do it because they're connecting to outcomes in our assessment.
Are you aware of who the ministry pulls in that gives that direction as to what is that foundational knowledge? And
No.
Are the arts represented? You know, is it more than business?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I do know that part. I don't know who specifically is in there, but each subject area would bring in, so the visual arts would be definitely connecting to community members as well. Elders are coming in. You know, there's a lot of voices sitting at that table, which is why this change is so slow, for sure. And then you balance that with the need to change more quickly to get into these spaces. But yes, I believe anyways, the ministry has done a pretty darn good job of bringing in lots of voices to make sure that, you know, a student coming out of Saskatchewan is still going to be prepared for pharmacy. And you guys don't say, oh man, don't touch those people from Saskatchewan, they don't know their stuff. So no, they're definitely looking at that. Right, and I think that's the question. So my understanding from talking to Dean is that the changes at the 30 level will not happen the same way. The 20 level is that foundation of building into the 30 level. So for example, with the Bio 20 before, there was no connection between, it wasn't a prerequisite for Bio 30. So the 30 level courses will remain, from my understanding, fairly similar. And again, the changes wouldn't be made without post-secondary input, because the reason you're taking those 30 level sciences is to go into your programs. It was opening up at a 20 level for, again, a little bit more specialized area around healthcare and environmental sciences. The physical science is still the same content as it was before physics and chemistry. Some of that might be shifted into physics and Chem 30.
I was going to ask is, obviously, the passion you have for all of this, it's to the point now where enough students have progressed kind of in this environment of high technology for learning, and they're getting cast into situations where it's still archaic in terms of how things go. What's happening with those students? Is it kind of the ones that are good or surviving, or can you give sort of any comments on that?
I can give you comments on that, because I thought about talking about that, but my son that's at McGill, for example, I'm going to give you that example about archaic practices, perhaps. He's a math guy, and he phoned and he was fairly distraught because one question on his midterm exam ended up equaling 8% of his final grade. He's an honors student, a double major in finance and economics. He needs to have a certain GPA to maintain that. So that was very concerning to him. And he phoned, and literally we had a 2-hour Skype conversation about assessment practices, because he didn't grow up with that in our K-12 environment. So by the end, he was angry. So by the end of that conversation, all I said to him was, I think all you can do is go and talk to that prof and make him aware of it and see if the awareness is going to change anything. I don't know. The same kind of thing happened with my middle son, who asked me, or came home and he said, so when Jeff started the PowerPoint, started me off by saying, should we just teach the PowerPoint? He came home from a class and said, oh, man, we were done in 35 minutes. The guy just read off his slides. And that was a aha moment for him. Not for me, but certainly it was for him. So I did try to explain to him that, a university's mandate is a lot of the times around research, and the people that are in the front of the class might not necessarily be teachers. And I did go and I looked at a lot of universities. I know there's lots on good teaching and learning, and, there's webinars and there's sessions that you can go to and to learn how to be a better teacher. But that was a big aha moment for him. Is it going to change how he interacts at the university? No, because he's got a good support system at home that says, no, that's okay, you can keep doing it. I will tell you, though, he also got assessed by grade 12s that came in. He was doing a presentation, and the prof said, hey, just give your feedback on how he did, and he got a mark on his presentation by grade 12 students, which I thought was interesting, because I didn't think they were qualified. But luckily, he played ball with quite a few of them, and so he got 100, because this whole podium would have been shaking. But it was a really interesting conversation for he and I to have about, are your marks even worth anything at the university? Which is what he said. Does it even matter as long as I pass? And how could I deny that probably was true? I mean, those are the tough kind of conversations that I'm having. Doesn't matter if you get a 60 or an 80 when somebody's going to give you 8% less on your whole course based on one question. So is it going to impact? I think it will impact. I think it does impact. Whether you'll see that in the College of Pharmacy, I don't know. You do have those high achievers who want to be in there for that profession. Is it impacting other kids? Well, they're having conversations around it for sure.
One more question.
I want to ask about social media. And it seems like with the we generation coming into our schools, it would probably be useful for us to be able to leverage social media in such a way as to try to improve their learning. But my question is, given the way that social media is being used by this generation, is constantly in flux, and for guys like me who are not necessarily old fogies yet, but are kind of moving in that direction, what do you think is the best way for us to kind of stay on top of the way that students are even using social media in the first
Well, I think when it comes to any digital devices, it's appropriate use. So the conversations that we have at K-12, we have some teachers who are like me that would use this all the time as a tool for teaching. We have other teachers that would go, don't even touch that. So our policies are conversation with kids, bringing them into the conversation for sure, and talking acceptable use. Hey, you're in my class. I'm not comfortable with you tweeting. I don't know. We have that at the K-12 level. However, what we found is when you say no, there's usually some pushback. So instead, we're trying to say, how can you use that really for good? Hey, tweet out what you're learning. So I'll give you an example from History 20 classroom. On Fridays, the one teacher said, we're going to have Twitter Fridays for 20 minutes. And anything that you've learned this week, tweet some stuff out about it, use this hashtag, and then start asking questions. So they're learning how to use it in a responsible manner. And I'm just talking Twitter. Again, I think it's that awareness piece. I've gone into schools and done a lot of presentations on rights and responsibilities about what you can post of somebody without their permission. So the fact that a student would take a video of me and post that is actually illegal. So we have those conversations about how to use social media as well. And they don't know. Like I said, it's the World Wide Web is the wild, wild west. So until we tell them what the parameters are and you will start seeing that happening. I mean, the ministry is really focusing on that. Starting right now, we're doing a DC MOOC. We're doing a massive open online course. I'm doing that on Tuesday and Wednesday nights with, I think there's 800 participants worldwide right now, learning about how to be more socially responsible. And it's not just at the K-12, so.
I'm not sure how you,
Thank you.
stay here.
Okay.